Good afternoon, and thank you for joining the second webinar in our KFI Capabilities series, a quarterly briefing designed to showcase KFI's product offerings. Today's presentation will focus on streamlining financial intelligence for depository institutions and industry participants. To learn more about KBRA Financial Intelligence, simply scan the QR code on screen. While all attendees have joined in listen-only mode, we encourage you to engage with our presenter through the Q&A feature. Should you have any additional questions on the topics discussed today, we are always available for a follow-up call. Now, I'd like to hand things over to Lance Caldwell, a Senior Director on our KFI team, who will present today's session.
Well, thank you, Michelle, and welcome everyone. Appreciate you taking time out of your day to learn more about KBRA Financial Intelligence. So I'll refer to it as KFI here most of during our time this afternoon. But wanted to let you know we've got a lot of information to cover, and so we will be recording this webinar and sending it out afterwards. So feel free to take notes. Feel free to send in questions through the chat feature. I'm going to hold the questions till the end and answer them when we're all wrapped up. But before we turn to the web application, I wanted to at least give you a little background about who we are, what we do, and why it matters. And so with that, we are a part of the Kroll Bond Rating Agency, KBRA, a global credit rating agency. And KFI was launched in 2020 as a data provider with coverage on approximately 10,000 US banks and credit unions. We apply a proprietary scoring model to regulatory financial data that's filed each quarter, which provides an independent, transparent, and risk-focused score for each entity that we cover. What our platform does, it provides comprehensive financial intelligence spanning many data sets, and we'll talk about all those here in just a moment, but it combines our score on top of measuring the institution's financial health each quarter with this comprehensive banking data, which enables a couple of use cases: peer benchmarking and counterparty risk management. And why we think this matters, it's intuitive data tools that help streamline your analysis, aligns your internal decision-making with external oversight and capital market expectations, and it helps with market share analysis, M&A evaluation, strategic planning, and more. When you think about who uses KFI, most of our clients are banks. Clearly, that's a large component of what we have in the way of our subscriber base, but we also have corporates and credit unions, financial services firms, investment firms, as well as associations and insurance companies. So you can see it's not just for banks, it's for other entities too that are interested in banking and credit unions. The two use cases that we're going to touch on today, the first one, peer benchmarking, peer analysis that helps support strategy, governance, and growth. When you think about performance analysis, identifying strength and growth opportunities, utilizing our standardized metrics in the supportive data. Our KFI score is helpful for comparing institutions side by side using a consistent risk-based benchmark. And we cover the entire balance sheet, so you can analyze loans, deposit compositions, identify growth, retention, concentration risks. And you can even evaluate your investment securities, your funding mix, liquidity trends, and other structural changes in your balance sheet. We think this is important because it provides strategic and board-level insights, helping evaluate potentially M&A and partnership opportunities and prepare for board executive meetings with clear, consistent, and illustrated insights. Our other use case, counterparty risks, it's financial analysis to support third-party oversight, investment and capital access. Investment and credit monitoring are very popular, particularly with some of the sub-debt issues that are out in the marketplace, helping evaluate those as new investment opportunities come to the table, supporting investors, insurers, banks, and corporates that are providing capital to depository institutions. And then thinking about counterparty risk and relationship risk, assessing banking and deposit relationships for concentration, exposure, and stability, evaluating correspondent banking partners for credit, liquidity, and operational risk, and again, providing a transparent data-driven report for external stakeholders. Our platform is also popular for program eligibility. Thinking about some of the government-sponsored enterprises, the GSEs, they use KFI scores as acceptance criteria for their lending programs. This includes Fannie, Freddie, and Ginnie. And it's also a great independent benchmark used by insurers to determine collateral eligibility and setting premium pricing using objective rule-based metrics. So all in all, it helps align internal financial management with external capital market and program requirements. Again, before we turn to the web app itself, I want to make sure everybody has a clear understanding of the data sets and delivery channels that we offer. When you think about the regulatory filings, we cover all banks, regardless of which FFIC report they file. There's approximately, not quite 5,000 of those in our inventory. Uniform bank performance reports by the FFIC are also included in the platform. We have bank holding company reports, the Y9s, the Y6s, as well as the credit union Form 5300. For public filers, we've added in primary bank statements and loan portfolio dimensional data. So you'll find that, and we'll look at that in a bank holding company profile here momentarily. And then as far as our other data sets, our KFI score, which is our proprietary model, is a big part of what we offer, also including summary deposit data from FDIC, M&A data, which we have a new screener that I'm going to highlight today. And then we have pricing for public banks in their stock, enforcement actions across the four major regulatory agencies, Community Reinvestment Act ratings for our banks, and then finally macro and economic demographic data from the Federal Reserve and the U.S. Census. And then last and certainly not least, we have our KFI Insights research. And so if you're not subscribed for that, please let us know. We'll get you signed up so you can get that content that we send out on a regular basis. But there's essentially three ways to get the information: through the web application, the Excel add-in, which we'll spend some time on as well today. And then for those that want to hydrate their own CRM systems, we have the opportunity for you to develop some standard, even custom data feeds. So I'm going to move over now into our web app. And I've pulled up on my screen the landing page for KFI. And what you'll notice, there's a listing of scores, which we'll talk about here in a moment, but we have three models that users can select from. Under the regulatory type heading on our navigation pane here, we have banks, bank holding companies, and credit unions. You can filter these by state, by region, by asset size, if you'd like to look at a specific group of institutions given either location or size, and then certainly by KFI score, which runs from A down to E. And if you're not familiar with our scores, we have a resource tab, and we have our scoring scale, which is included up here. But in a nutshell, A is considered to be a strong financial institution, E is weak, and everything in between falls in that continuum. We do not score institutions when we're missing key financial information that's derived from our methodology. So occasionally you'll see an NS. And then for new institutions, we do not score them until they have 3 years of activity. We do have modifiers between the A and C category just as a differentiator. But when you look at most of the banks in the country, you'll see that most of them fall into that B area, which is considered sound. And when we think about what the changes have been, at least in this particular diagram, 412 have increased, or excuse me, decreased, 525 have increased, then a little over 3,000 have unchanged. And we're looking at the quarters between the fourth quarter of last year and the first quarter of this year. So you can toggle these and change them and see how that impacts the distribution of the scores across this graphic representation. Down below on the screen, you'll see 3 of the over 30 components that go into our model. We're focusing in here on earnings performance with ROAA, asset quality with non-performing assets, and then capital with Tier 1. And you'll see the distribution of where the banks lie across this entire population of banks. Down below, you can see as few as 10 or as many as 100 institutions listed here on this main page. But you can toggle these items to see which banks moved up and down across the scoring model. Here I've selected those that went down the most. 6 notches is pretty significant, going from B to an E. And I think it's important to know that our reliability of our model from a predictability of failure, when banks do hit D or E historically, over the last 15 years, about 95% of the time they fail. So it's not 100%, but it's a significant number due, and including the 2 banks that have failed so far in 2026, the one in Chicago, the one in Georgia. Both of those institutions had been E scored for about a year each. You can also look at the banks that are moving in the upward trajectory. So those that have increased, going from a C- to a B, in this case for a bank in Oklahoma. But you can sort these on asset size. You can use any of these columns and group them however you'd like. And then you can also see what the contributing factors are across those 3 metrics that we've highlighted here that are influencing their score. But we'll look at a sentiment analysis here in a bit that has a lot more detail on how the score is calculated and how that looks on a quarter-over-quarter basis. As far as looking at an individual bank, you can come up to our main heading and you can search by name, ticker, RSSD, which is a Federal Reserve identifier, the FDIC cert number, CIK, or even a KAC ID, which is our own unique identifier. We're going to look at a bank in my home state of Kansas for our session today, Equity Bank. And I've just pulled them up on their homepage, their overview page, and each bank has its very own profile that looks just like this, including a branch map, which will show all their locations. And we'll look at this again in a little bit more detail under the branch mapping menu. You'll see their website, location, parent company, subsidiaries if they have any, size, deposits, and then also includes their CRA rating, most recent CRA rating, and then any enforcement actions that might have applied to the entity over the last few years. In instances where a bank and or holding company is an NRSRO client of KBRA, that means we're doing a full-fledged credit rating, debt rating, that'll be identified here. And so Equity Bank is one of those 160 banks that we work with across the industry. And you'll see that highlighted on the main page as well. And then you'll see a history of their score over the last several years. And then down below, you'll see some quarterly graphic representations of their performance metrics, asset quality, capital, liabilities, and funding. And then to the right, you'll see similar information, but on an annual basis in numeric form. The View Full Snapshot link will take you directly to our Financials tab and pull up the snapshot report. And this represents the scoring model that we've applied for this bank. And we're looking at the first quarter. We can also look at annual view or a quarterly view, but we're looking at the quarterly view at this moment. As we scroll down, you'll see some of the same graphs we saw before, but we've added a couple more with deposit composition and loan composition. And then you can see quarter over quarter how this bank's score has changed and what's driving that across the performance measures, asset quality, capital, leverage and funding, loan portfolio concentration, and rates. You can generate a single one-page PDF. And so I've just clicked on that PDF button and it brings up that snapshot report. You can print out front and back a single document, two-sided page, and you can share that, email it, whatever might work best for your team. The other information we have under the Financials tab at the bank level includes our calculation summary. And so this is reflecting all of those metrics that we looked at on the snapshot report, but we can look at these in as few as 4 periods or as many as 40 periods. I need to go to quarterly here. 40 periods out in the web app. So you can look at this in quite a bit of depth as far as the history goes. You can change up the calculation convention. I'm leaving it here at quarterly, but you can look at some of these others that we calculate in the back end. You can forward and reverse how they're presented if you want to see things more recent or the ones that are the oldest. And then in a moment, I'll show you how the thousands work when we go into the financial summary. But each particular metric has its very own mnemonic. And so you'll see that every item, in this case, return on average assets, is given its unique identifier that you'll utilize when you go out into our Excel add-in. And we'll do that as well this afternoon. In addition to seeing that specific item, when it's a calculated field, you'll see the actual formula so you can audit exactly what's being reflected in a particular ratio. We follow regulatory calculation definitions, so there's nothing interesting or unique about what we do. If there's a situation where you may have your own calculation that we don't offer, we can actually build that for you in the back end and assign a mnemonic to it if that's helpful. But I can click on this mnemonic and it'll take me to our data dictionary. And this is going to show you where you can search for all the various and different items that are in our data warehouse. So if you're wondering what the mnemonic is, you can search and look these up very simply in our data dictionary. Beyond the calculation summary, we have the financial summary, which again, we can look at these in different periods and how they're shown. And I can show these in millions or thousands, whatever my preference might be when it's actual dollars. Yields and costs across both the loan portfolio and the deposit book are reflected here. Compositions for deposits and loans. and then delinquent and non-performing loans. So some asset quality metrics here that you can take a look at. And again, each one of these has its very own metric. So if you're wondering, how you can extract that and put it into Excel, you'll be able to do that. And speaking of Excel, you can actually download any of these pages directly into a spreadsheet, and you can manipulate this information if that's particularly helpful for your use case. Beyond these first few screens, the income statement all the way down, these are just going to be reflected of the call report schedules. And so those are all highlighted here that you can drill down and look in. If you're wanting to see some history on any of these items, you can certainly do that on the balance sheet front, income statement, whatever your needs might be. In addition to the call report information, this is where we also house the UBPR under the financials tab. And so I'm just going to select the summary ratios. This keeps you from having to go out to FFIC.gov to pull this information, and it's utilizing the peer group that the FFIC has assigned to this institution, which is banks between $3 and $10 million in total assets. KFI has so much more to offer in the way of peer analysis. This is just the FFIC's definition. I'm going to show you how you can create your own peer group today that might be unique to your geography or performance that you can benchmark your institution or an institution you're interested against. After the financials, we have scores and ratings. And so again, this is going to reflect their KFI score, the most recent one based on first quarter call report. And then you'll see the KBRA ratings that we have here for both the credit in the short and the long term. The branch map, you might recall, we saw that on the overview screen, but I wanted to pull that up here in this feature because this provides you with a lot more capabilities to look at the footprint and layer on some additional institutions. Each one of these dots represents a location, which is coming from the FDIC summary of deposit data, which is filed each year in June. This is looking at last year's 2025. We'll have 2026 here in just a little while. But if I'm a bank or an interested party that wants to see, how my footprint stacks up with another institution, I can add banks by simply typing in their name, and that will layer on within this view the other institutions that I might have, in my locale that I'm competing against, or maybe an institution that I might be interested in acquiring. And so this allows you to look at as many as 20 institutions. I'll add just one more here for illustrative purposes because they all come up in a different color so that you can differentiate between the markets. And so these are 3 Kansas charters that all line up very closely together, but you can come again and look at, how their branch locations perform on their total deposits. After the branch map, we have the CRA ratings. This is going to show history of the ratings for this particular bank. And then enforcement actions. This will reflect what actions have been filed in a public nature. It's not going to include informal. These will need to be formal, publicly available actions. And as you review this page, you can actually pull up the documents that are related to whatever order it might be. And then finally, on the bank view, the M&A section, we're going to look at this at the screener level here in just a moment, but this is reflecting this bank's M&A activity at the bank level. So this would be a bank-to-bank type of view that you have in this particular screen. I'm going to back up here for a moment and look at the corporate structure, and this will show the bank's parent, Equity Bank Shares, and then also some subsidiaries for the bank itself. But if I select the hyperlink into the holding company, this is going to bring me to the holding company page, and it's going to look very familiar to what we saw at the bank level, but instead of having the score for the bank, this is actually the holding company score. And you can see the history out here, including the KBRA issuer rating for the holding company. Down below, we have some views for the financials on a consolidated level. And then on the financials tab, we have the Y9C information that you can look at, including the snapshot, calculation summary, the financial summary. These are all similar layouts that we saw before, but again, this is going to be consolidated now for the entire organization. In addition to the Y9, we have GAAP. So this is the publicly available data that we acquire from the SEC. And you can drill down on this and you'll see that each one of these items has its own very unique mnemonic as well. So if you're interested in your total assets from the public filing perspective, you would be using this mnemonic to pull that data into any Excel templates that you may be using. Scores and ratings is going to look the same, but again, at the holding company level. Documents is new. We didn't have this at the bank level, so this is going to include the earnings transcripts for the holding company, given it's publicly traded. And I can click on that little link, and that'll bring up the notes from that call. And then for the stock prices, I should have pointed out, you will see these at the top of the screen, but then you can see a time series and a history on the stock prices, and you can change these over different time continuums if you'd like to take a look at it. Estimates on the stock. And then if there are enforcement actions, which I don't think there are at the holding company level, those would be highlighted here. But this is a pretty acquisitive bank in the Midwest, and so they have done quite a few transactions at the holding company level. And you can actually click down on each deal ID. I didn't show this on the bank level, but it would have been there as well. But this will show the transaction disclosed earlier this year when Equity picked up Frontier up in Nebraska. So I've spent these first few minutes just going over these two profile pages we have for the banks and the holding companies. We have similar information on the credit unions, but I wasn't going to delve into that today. If you are a credit union, you want to spend some time looking at those, happy to set up a one-off conversation with you so you can take a look at that on an exclusive level. But I'm going to move over into our portfolio tool. This is one of the new things that we just started beta testing here in the last few months. This is based upon user feedback given to us over the course of time that this allows for users to come in and build out charts, and it'll certainly be more than that as we evolve, but not have to go into the Excel add-in in order to do that. So I created just some simple graphs here for you to view, and then I'm going to create one as well. But you can see I've taken Equity Bank and looked at some performance measures for them, including how their asset size compares to 7 other peers, looking at their yields and costs across their loan and deposit portfolios, looking at how capital is trending here, and then even their deposit composition. So I'm going to show you how you can create a couple of these graphs in really a simple, short order. So I'm going to go back and start with my new chart builder and add a chart, and I'm going to do a combo chart today. So from here, I'm going to pick a title, and I'm just going to select ROA versus net interest margin. My data source is going to be the call report, and I'm going to select a different bank. We have a bank here in Kansas called Dream First, which I love. And so I'm going to pull up Dream First, and I need to bring in the return on average assets. And I'm going to bring in their net interest margin. And I can choose either tax equivalent or not tax equivalent. I'm going to select the not tax equivalent option. So I've got these 2 data points selected. Both of them are identified as bar, but I'm going to change one of these to line. That way you can see them in 2 different formats. My frequency, I can choose the different calculation conventions that we looked at before. I'm going to select quarterly in this case. My date, we use relative dates, and we'll see this more in the Excel add-in in a bit. But I'm going to use 0Q, which is going to point to the most current quarter. And I'm going to move this out to, let's look at 8 quarters. And I'm going to save this chart. So I've essentially added this very easily. Didn't take me much time at all. I can make changes to this if I wanted to change my quarter to year end instead of this most current quarter. I can do that. I can add additional quarters if that makes sense to do so. But I also can come in here and edit this again if I decide I wanted to bring in maybe another data point. And so let's add an efficiency ratio here and come down to my data point selection, type in efficiency. And I'm going to make both return on average assets and net interest margin line, since they're closely represented in percentages. And I'll have efficiency as my bar. And I'll save these changes. So now I've just changed this up and added another data element in here that helps with looking at this bank's overall performance, both from ROAA, margin, and efficiency. I'll do one more graph just for illustration purposes here. I'm going to make up a pie chart for Dream First. This time I'm going to look at their deposits. I'll come down and select call report. and I'll type in dream. And this is going to already let me know or show me the ratios and metrics for their deposits. So I'm just going to select their now accounts, their MMDAs, their demand deposits, and jumbo. I don't think they have any foreign deposits, so I'm going to leave that one unchecked for this example. Frequency, I'm going to look at annual basis. And in this case, 0 year will be year end last year. I'm going to save this chart. And now I have their deposit levels for last year for this particular institution. You can put up to 4 graphs on these pages, and then we have this PDF option. I didn't show this before on the one I'd already created, so it's only going to have 2 on this, but this will pull up a report then that you could present to a board, to ALCO, and use this for your regular reporting. So we're very excited about having the chart builder in our inventory for additional features and functionality. And you'll see that we have a table builder, reports, alerts, watch lists, screeners, other things that are going to be coming down the pike. So stay tuned, and we're just getting started. The screener option has been a part of the web app for quite some time, but traditionally it's just been a basic way to pull in banks looking at a limited amount of data that we have in our warehouse. Just some key financials that folks like to look at, but it's not going to have as much detail. And so that's what the Kansas Bank screener is that I've built. I'm not going to point to that today because we're going to build another one here in a bit in the Excel add-in. But I did create a M&A transaction screener just showing what this looks like, and we're going to create a new one too. But this was a screener I put together just showing for acquirers only, looking at the Midwest and just Kansas, Missouri for the last 5 years and deals that were complete. And so you can see that it took, quite a few deals all the way down to just 32 when I made this screener. But I'm going to back out. I'm going to create another one for us today so you can see how quick and easy it is to put together a screener so you can monitor the market. I've come in and I'm going to look at regulatory type. I'm going to pick banks and bank holding companies. And these are the acquirers. I'm going to just add those to my filter. As far as the target goes, I'm going to pick the same and add those to my filter. So I'm using an AND operator, which is more confined. If I had OR, you'll notice that it'll create, you have 3,771. If I do OR, that has quite a bit more, but I'm going to move it back to and leave that as my selection criteria. I'm going to keep with my theme of the Midwest and select at the acquirer level and target as well. And so now I've brought this down to about 800 deals. So this gives me a good indication of how many transactions have happened. But I also can come in and narrow my search further by looking at deals that maybe have happened just, I'll say close dates. I'm going to say just in the last 5 years. Things are a little bit more recent. So that brings me down to 86 deals. I can come in and look at deal value as an option. Now, not all the transactions are going to have all the information populated because sometimes the investment bankers don't provide it, but what's available we have. And so I'm going to use total deal value and just say anything that was greater than $1 million and add that to my filter. So that takes me down to 39. And then I want to look at deals as far as from a ratio perspective that had a price to book that was north of 1.25. Got a little dialog box here in my way. I need to move that. There we go. And add that to my filter. So that takes me down to 16 deals. So I've really narrowed my focus using this screener, and I pulled in from tens of thousands of transactions down to 16 deals that I want to look at and keep track of. And so you can pull this into Excel and manipulate it. And in the future, we'll have some alerts that as deals come through, you'll be able to be notified that those are available. So I'll just go ahead and save this screener, and I'm just going to call it Kansas Banks here for now. And I'll save this for the future. So again, we're excited about this new feature. If you're an existing subscriber, we'd love to get your feedback on it. We've had some folks beta testing it for a while, but we're excited about having this and hope to have more features and functionality in this realm down the road. The next tab I'm going to show us is the industry tab. And this is back in the summary of deposit realm with the FDIC information that we have. And I'm just going to select Abilene, Texas as an MSA. If you've gone out to FDIC.gov before and looked at their summary of deposit information, you're going to be very familiar with this view. And this will reflect everything all the way back to 1994 if you're looking at any MSA. And you can combine MSAs. You don't have to do just one. You could have multiple, and it'll come in and calculate the offices and locations that are both inside and outside of market. And you can download those here into Excel if you like to manipulate them from there. But we have a lot more in the way of capabilities in the dashboard, which I want to move to next. And we'll look at the branch analysis there in a moment. But before we do that, we've looked at everything really on an entity level. And what the dashboard does is it brings everything now at an industry level, including CRA, enforcement actions, the deposit information is a lot more robust, which we'll demonstrate here in just a moment. But if I want to come in and create a filter and save it, which you can do using the Sigma platform or software, if I select bank on CRA ratings, this is going to allow me to go in and see what agency, whether it's the FDIC, OCC, FRB, OTS back in the day. You can see these. You can select a company ID, state, and see what's going on with the CRA, across a region or just a few banks if that's important to you. And we show visually what the ratings are across the continuum, both by agency as well as the rating. Similarly, on enforcement actions, you can narrow your focus here as well across agencies, companies, states, issue dates, and even action types. And so if you're interested in cease and desist orders or formal agreements, whatever the case may be, you can select those, and then we have categories that you can select from as well to even refine your detail more granularly. And we have some graphs down below that allow you to see what your results look like. But as promised, the deposit summary is probably one of my favorite things to use out here in the dashboard. That annual data from the FDIC is populated into this form so you can become really informed about what's happening in your area, whatever that might be. The default view is pulling up the 4 largest institutions in the industry: B of A, JP, PNC, and Wells. And you can see across the entire country they have over 15,000 branches and almost $6 trillion in deposits. But if I want to define my market more at a granular level, I can look at MSA, city, county, state, and zip code. And I'm just going to narrow this down for state purposes today and save this. And so that's going to bring my view now into the state of Kansas and show that of these largest 4 institutions in the country, there's 43 branches and about 8.7 billion in total deposits. But I can come in and select other banks in the state as well. And if I'm just going to look at those that have the most branch presence in the state, I'm going to come down and pick every bank charter that has over 25 locations in the state of Kansas. And now that has changed my view and added these additional banks. And my subject bank, Equity Bank, is now in the picture. There's 340 branches, almost 37 billion in total deposits. And what's happened down below is I can see now how my bank stacks up against the entire state with these institutions that I've selected. If you want to look at it in a more broad fashion, I can come in and I can actually just get rid of all the RSSDs here. I've already defined my market as Kansas, and now I have over 1,000 or over 1,300 branches and over 102 billion in total deposits. And I can come down if I'm thinking at Equity Bank, I've gone from having, I think it was a little over 4% in market share down to 2% market share for the state. So very helpful to see this information, and you can think about different use cases, how you could get even down to the zip code to look at your competition and understand what they have in the way of market share. On the branch analysis, this is going to take any location in the country, and our default view is a Wells Fargo branch based out in LA. And this is going to capture this data that we have since 1994 to see how this branch has performed with its deposits in this time series. You'll be able to see the physical location, and then over this time frame, the growth both in dollars and percentages. So very, very robust and helpful to look at markets and those that might be growing versus those that might not be. In addition to the summary deposit data that we have here on its own, we've also layered it on with U.S. Census information. And so as you're looking at markets and you're concerned about demographics, your community banks do represent your community and those demographics that are influencing how you perform and what your bank's potential might be. We've brought in all these different items between income, ancestry, age, sex, education, household. And if I just look at you, for instance, age and sex, I can see that across all the MSAs, what's happening in this realm. And I can narrow this down to, a specific MSA if I'm looking at, again, LA or New York, whatever the case may be, and even look at, an institution or multiple institutions. So it gives you a lot of visual intelligence about what's going on in the way of your market across these U.S. Census items. We also have included FRED, Federal Reserve Economic Data, in the dashboard. We have several hundred data points that you can query and export and use for reporting. GDP is our default view, but you click on the data points, you can see we have prime and Fed funds, various Treasury, M1, M2, lot of options that you can come in and plot on graphs, export, and work with for your own internal reporting. We've also developed some macro indicator pages that are great PDFs that you can print out and include in your board packages across these items, and also housing and construction, and also fiscal and monetary policy. The last thing I wanted to cover in the application and in the dashboard is our sentiment analysis before we move into the Excel add-in. And we have both bank and credit union capabilities to come in and look at how a score has changed during multiple quarters. In this case, we're looking at Flagstar, and we go all the way back to the fourth quarter of 2022 when they were in that sound B category. And you can see over the course of time, they encountered some challenges and dipped from a B minus down to an E between the first quarter and second quarter of 2024. What the graph shows on the side here to the right is what's causing that score to decline. Anything above 0 is positively influencing the score across our model and inputs. Anything below 0 is negatively impacting it. So liquidity and funding has had some impact in Flagstar's case, but certainly asset quality has been the item that was the driving force for that dip down to NE back in 2024. You can see they're climbing their way out, and you could pick any bank and do this type of analysis to see what's influencing that score in any given time frame. We also have a multiple bank comparison. So if you're interested in how your bank's score in any quarter looks against your peers, we've created this view, and we have just 5 banks listed here, but you could add more and see if you have more peers than that you want to see side by side. But just allows you to come in and again highlight over and see what's the contributing factors here. Why is their score a C versus a B versus any other score that might be assigned? So hopefully these items will be helpful for you as you think about looking at the industry collectively and perhaps at your bank on a standalone basis. So with that, I'm going to shift our focus now over into Excel. So I'm going to pull up just a blank workbook here. And I've loaded in our Excel add-in, and I have a KFI ribbon in the top menu. And when you have this installed on your computer, you'll get the menu that includes the data wizard, the refresh option, our template library, which we'll look at here in a moment, and there's some other help about in a logout feature. But if I select the data wizard option, this is going to initialize the screener. Again, we kind of looked at this a little bit in the web app, but we haven't really tested out the functionality. So we're going to do that now. And I'm going to come in and just select banks as my company type. And that's going to show there's over 30,000 records that we have in our inventory. And I'm going to narrow our focus down to my home state of Kansas. And so you can see that over the course of history, there's been over 1,000 call reports that have been filed. So this is going to include banks that have failed, that have been consolidated, but I really want to just look at those that are active. So I come over to the financial selection and I pick balance sheet, and I'm going to select total assets, and I'm going to say those that are just greater than zero. Add that to my criteria, and that now narrows my focus down to 186 commercial banks. If I'm thinking about a peer group and I consider my institution a high performing bank, and I want to maybe narrow this a little bit further, I'm going to pick net interest margin under my performance measures, and I'm going to say anything that's greater than 4.5%. That's a pretty good number these days. And so if I add that in, that takes me down now to 30 companies. And so if I feel like I'm a high performing bank located in Kansas, these 30 institutions are, based, doesn't really matter their asset size. This is who I'm going to focus in on. And I'm going to show these companies so I can just take a quick look at them here. And if I'm good with this list, now I can go into my field selection, and this is where the entire universe of data now opens up to me. I can come in and pick my company information, and I'm going to want to find out where these folks are located, at least by city. I know they're in Kansas, so I'm just going to add city over into my selected fields. Definitely want to know their KFI score. In fact, I want to know it for the next, or the last, I should say, 3 quarters. So I've brought that into my query. And then for bank information, the call report information across these 3 schedules, I'm going to pick some ratios and metrics. Let's go down to performance measures again. I'm going to select efficiency ratio. I'm going to keep that at 3 quarters. And I could look at, half year, annual, but quarterly works for me. So I'm just going to leave that at the default. And then beyond return on or net interest margin, I want to look at return on average assets too. So I have that field. I'm going to select 3 of those and bring that into my pick. So I've selected all these items here in the Excel add-in. I can again preview this report directly in the data wizard. Make sure that I have all these data points that I'm interested in. If I think this is a good group, I'm ready to export it to Excel. I click on that, and you'll see in the background, I have an Excel sheet that just populated with these institutions. So this is a good group of banks for me to work with and take a look at. But as I got to thinking, maybe I should have brought another item in here, maybe return on equity. I can do that as well right here within the spreadsheet. I don't have to go back to the data wizard. I can insert a column, and I can highlight my column heading and copy that and paste it. And you'll see this pound calc reflects up, which just lets me know that I need to refresh my screen. But I'm going to select the mnemonic. KCall ROAA is return on average assets. I just happen to know that ROAE happens to return on average equity. So I've changed that. And then just to demonstrate the fact that, if I needed to add one more bank that I forgot, or maybe there's one in another state that I think is really a solid peer that I need to include, I can always come in and add that into my list without having to go back to that screener. So I'm just going to paste that in here as well. It'll be a duplicative bank, but this will show you just how quickly and easily you can get this information out of the warehouse into an Excel spreadsheet. So Howard State Bank is showing up twice. And now I can see I have return on average equity that's reflected here. So we have a number of different templates that you can select from. I select the template library, and that pulls it back to the web app. You could have accessed this from our home screen as well. That was over in the top left-hand corner of the page. But you'll see we have quite a few templates in the bank space, a couple in the holding company space, credit union, as well as public financial institutions. And I've already opened up a few of these in the background, but I just wanted you to see, the variety that we have off the shelf. We can certainly create templates on a custom level. If you're using templates from another provider and you want to convert those into our mnemonics, we can help you with that. But I'm going to go back into Excel and just pull up our deposit comparison that we have here, since deposits, are the raw materials of banking, and a lot of focus on them there have been for quite some time. But this is a list of banks that's just automatically populated in this template. And this you would need to consider to be a peer group. And you'll notice I have some NAs out here. It's because we haven't refreshed this, and we're going to do that here in just a moment. But I'm going to show you some of these other pages on this particular template and show you how easy it is to navigate and make some changes to it. We have a time series for the deposits of any of the banks that are listed on that instruction page. And so Synchrony Bank is our subject bank here that we're focused in on, but I'll be able to change this and I'll show you how easy that is here in a moment. The deposit peer comparison is going to allow you to show 5 institutions side by side on their composition and how they vary. So very helpful as you're thinking about your bank compared to others that you might consider to be peers and how they're performing in that regard. This particular template has an uninsured deposit comparison with SVB's failure from 2023. Still continues to be a lot of focus on uninsured deposits, so you can see the trends and how that stacks up across all these institutions that are in this particular peer group. And then the last page is a nice peer comparison using a subject bank, benchmarking it against the other banks that are listed on that instruction tab. And again, NA because I haven't refreshed this. But if I wanted to move from Synchrony Bank to Trustmark Bank, I can just copy the KAC ID, come over into the time series, and simply just paste that in here. And now I've changed this data series over this time frame from Synchrony to Trustmark Bank. On the deposit peer comparison, I already had Trustmark Bank here. Let's just go grab another one that's maybe down the way, Bank of Hope. I'll copy that one out. And now I've had Bank of Hope in there. Pound calc, I haven't refreshed, but when I do that, that'll be Bank of Hope. On the report here, if I wanted to change this out, I can change that to Bank of Hope. And now I'm going to come in and do my refresh and get everything all updated. So there's quite a bit of information to refresh, but I've done that now, and I can do a Control P and print this one page very easily and provide that to my colleagues, management team. But if I wanted to come back and think about this peer group, none of these banks are in Kansas that I see. So I'm going to go back to my Kansas list, this book 1, and I'm just going to highlight these here and do a simple copy, come back into my deposit, and I'm just going to paste these in here. So I've swapped out this group. I'm still going to have some of these banks in New Jersey, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. I'm not going to delete those rows. I could do that, but I'm just going to leave them in there for now. But I'm just going to show you that, if you like the template and you want to use your own peer group, you can come in and refresh this really quickly, and it's going to swap out these banks from really, all over the country, and they're all going to become, Kansas institutions here. So there you have it. So just wanted to show you that, you have a lot of capabilities here with the existing templates and using, a peer group that you want to assign and have for illustration purposes. One of the other templates that we have is a peer comparison that I think is really handy and shows, one bank against 10 other peers. You could make it, more or less depending upon your needs, but this is where you can come in, and right now this is pointed to the RSSD, but I could make this a KAC ID type deal, which, I'm going to go back and I'm going to make this some Kansas institutions here. I'm just going to grab 11 of these because there's 11 banks. Do a little copy. So I can easily take it from RSSD to KAC ID. That's what's really nice about KFI is you can use multiple identifiers. You don't have to use just the one. You can have KC, RSSD, CERT, whatever might work out. But I've swapped this out now into some Kansas banks. I'm going to do a little refresh. It's going to bring in these institutions. And now my report, I've got the Bankers Bank, which is probably not the best for a subject bank because they're a little unique, as many of you all know. But I can do a Control P and just show you this document. It comes up and it'll take all of the performance measures, many of these things we've seen already on the snapshot report, and are highlighted here. Some graphic representations of how the subject bank compares to its peer group, non-performing capital, cost of funds, asset growth, And then we have some other income statement, summary balance sheet items that you can take a look at, yields, costs. So very, very powerful and easy to make changes and just use this again right off the shelf. One last template, because this use case has come up quite a bit in recent conversations. We've had banks even sign up this year for the purposes of doing M&A analysis. We looked at this with regard to the branch mapping capabilities, and so that's a real powerful way to get a visual on how the footprints between two entities might look once they're combined. But sometimes I've heard from folks that they're trying to combine call report information. It's really cumbersome. And so we've built a template that allows you to change out the KC IDs, which I brought in a couple Kansas banks, changed it to the first quarter because it was pointing to another one, and I refreshed it. I won't do that now. You've seen the refreshing already enough times, but my summary calculations now are blending these two banks across these performance measures. So it gives you a really quick and easy way to see what a combined organization might look like. We do that also on the balance sheet, and we have some graphs over here to show contribution, income statement as well. And then, looking at loan portfolio, deposits, and delinquency. And so we have a graph over here showing the loans, deposit compositions. We saw this, in the deposit summary, but now we're looking at an M&A scenario and, what does it look like when you combine two entities together? And we have delinquencies too in the template. So, well, I'm about 52 minutes into this. I've covered a lot of information today. There were some questions that were submitted during the registration process, and so I'm just going to cover a couple of those. And let me go back here to this particular page as my contact information and phone number. So if you didn't get that before, you'll have that now. Disregard the picture. It's not my favorite, but is what it is. How could KFI incorporate into strategic planning measurements and/or peer KPIs into incentive compensation metrics? So thinking about KFI for strategic planning and how you can use that for peer comparison. So we are an objective framework that allows you to track and look at your strategic initiatives and how you're actually translating them into your bank's performance. And so you can use this platform to say, did we perform well because the market was favorable, or because we truly, management contributed to this success? And so I think that's one way that you could certainly look at capturing our platform and developing some templates and reports that either exist already. We have some, but if we need help with that, we could definitely provide that to you with our team that will back you up. The other question that came in is what differentiates our KFI scores or analytics from internal bank data? So thinking about publicly available data versus internal bank data, and how should institutions best integrate the two? And so, internal data, it tells you, how you are performing against your plan. But, KFI is going to tell you how you're performing against the market. And so as you think about identifying where banks are winning or perhaps lagging relative to your peers, I think that's where our platform can really help you explain why and determine, what actions to take to, become better or stronger. So I've got some questions here in the chat. So if you give me just a moment here, I'm going to see what we have here. How far back does the data go? It goes back as far as we have call report information. So long time ago. So in the web app, I showed you 40 quarters. And so you can go back to, we have records that go back into I should know this off the top of my head. It's in 1980s or 1990s. So we've got all the call report information in the platform. So it's not limited to just the last 5 or 10 years. It goes back a significant amount of time. And from the beta, when will these beta features be available to the user? Very soon. So we are working on our go-to-market, and so we'll be announcing the addition of those chart builder and the M&A screener very soon. So if you weren't a part of our test group and you want to get access, just reach out to me. We can give you a kind of a preview and get those sooner, because we'd love some feedback. So if you want to get those sooner than later, just reach out to me and we can definitely get that for you. And would love to do a trial with anybody or have another session if you want to go in a little bit deeper, talk about things that are specific to your institution. We can certainly do that. And can I get KFI score combined with regulatory data in a feed? Absolutely. So as you think about any data point that we have, we do have some standard data feeds that we offer, but we can definitely build those that are on a custom level and talk about what your needs are on a one-off basis to help you hydrate a system that you might have for internal purposes. Yeah, they had a question about calc. Yeah, whenever you see calc in the spreadsheets, that's just letting you know I need to refresh. And so it's not a bad thing to have calc. That means you're working, you're making some updates and definitely taking advantage of the power that the Excel add-in has. And from it, is there a way to include the purchase accounting entries on that? So I think you're referring to some of the M&A pieces. I did a little investment banking in my career, and so our template today is really just a blending of two balance sheets. But if there are additional items that you wanted to have built into a template, including pricing and payback periods, premiums, and things of that nature, that's something we could explore and work with you all on a one-off basis. But as far as the accounting entries and things that go like that, it sounds like that would be a little bit of programming, some formulas and things that could be included in any template that we have that comes from the data that we provide. So those were some of the questions that came in during the session. We're getting up here close to the hour. I think as we wrap up this afternoon, I just want to thank everybody for their time, for taking a portion of their day to learn more about our platform. We're very excited about these new enhancements that we've introduced and more that are coming, but would love to have a chance to visit with you all one-on-one. Please reach out, send me an email, and we can come back through any of these items that maybe you want to go a little bit deeper and talk about in more depth, or talk about some specific scenarios or applications, use cases that might be applicable for your needs. But I'm going to check and see one more time if I have any other questions. I don't think we do at the moment. So with that, I'll give you back a few minutes of your afternoon and look forward to hearing from everyone. Thank you again for joining us today to learn more about KFI. Take care.